Hello, I am Slip Giant, and this is the Red Side Blue Side podcast.
And my name is Retruption, and I'll be joining as well.
So, I'm an Urgot player. I enjoy League. I've been playing on and off for a couple years now. I really enjoy League, but other things have gotten in the way in my life before, and I've had to drop League, but I always end up picking it back up.
Yep, and I am a top lane main as well. I've been playing League since season one, since beta actually, and I peaked at Diamond One in season three and season four, and since then I've dropped all the way down to silver, and I am ranking back up, trying to get Diamond again. I'm currently Emerald Four, and uh, we want to create this podcast so we could just have a conversation and discussion about ranked League of Legends and possibly other video games in general.
Yeah. So something I have for you, Retruption, is when you've jumped in and out of league, come back and forth, do you feel like the game has improved since you've came back? Is it more difficult to play now?
Like the player base has improved.
Yes.
Yeah, so I feel like at least in the levels that I'm playing at, a lot of the players have not improved at their fundamentals. They might have like better Lee Sin flash plays, or they understand what's going to happen with certain champion interactions. Like maybe you have a Volibear, Volibear uses his ult when Malzahar uses his ult, and you just know what's going to happen. Whereas back in my day, people didn't really understand Unstoppable. They didn't understand Untargetable. They were still learning the game. So oftentimes you didn't see people flash important moves or abilities, and they would just get hit by them. And now they do flash the abilities, uh, but they still make silly mistakes. Like they'll get auto attacked to death under the turret and flash the last auto, but still die because the auto is in transit towards their character, and they'll fail flash. And you still see that a lot. You see people missing CS. You see people getting frustrated and raging at their team and blaming their teammates when it's their fault. They'll just be at top lane, they'll just be losing, and they'll be screaming at the jungler, "Hey, I need help." And it's like, well, yeah, you needed help, but you've died 4 or 5 times, and now you just need to play safe because you're never going to kill that top laner, even with the jungler's help.
Yeah. I mean, something from games that I've been playing the last couple days is I noticed that I almost have full control of my wave management. Usually, the enemy never tries to manipulate the wave. And I felt like even a few seasons ago, I'd play against people and they'd manipulate the wave. And I'm not seeing that anymore, even though I'm in a higher elo.
Yeah, I've noticed I see kind of those higher level plays in like half or maybe a third of my games. I see somebody really controlling the wave. They know when to freeze it, they know when to push it. I feel like I don't have a lot of control if I get behind in my matchup. And I feel like top lane specifically has a lot of counter pick matchups right now, and people do know how to abuse the counter pick matchup meta. Whereas before, when I played, there were a lot of players that would just play Riven. They only played Riven, or they only played Tryndamere. And if if you picked something that countered them, they would just lose. They didn't really have a game plan other than, well, I'll just try to outplay. And now you see a lot of people, well, if I got counterpicked at top, then I just need to try to get as much XP as possible and win in the late game from blue side, because oftentimes red side gets the counterpick.
Mm-hmm. That brings up another thought that I had is I have also seen a lot less one trick Rivens, one trick Tryndamirs in the game now. I think that top lane might have players that are more well rounded, willing to pick different champions. Um, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just not playing Riven or not playing Tryndamere as much.
Yeah, I would agree. I think most of the player base has gotten away from one tricking. I still see, like, I see it in some of my friends, like you play a lot of Urgot, and one of my friends plays only Jax, and 4 or 5 or 600 games of Jax in a season, and they don't really move up in elo. And I think part of that is that they're struggling to learn the champion all the way. They're you might learn the basics in 10 games or less, and then you're struggling to learn all the matchups in 100 games, and then over the course of 1,000 games you're trying to learn every nitty gritty detail. And with some of these champions like Riven, it's just too difficult to learn every single detail. She has maybe 7 or 8 or 9 different combos, and you want to use only 2 or 3 of them in each matchup. You're trying to fight Set, you need to use a certain combo. You're trying to fight uh, Fiora, you're using a different combo, and you're trying to mix it up. And people are focusing on all of that while they're still struggling to land all their CS and lane.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like one tricking has been an advantage for me because I feel like I know the matchups better. Like
Yeah.
when I'm playing against Fiora, I feel like I do so much better now because I played that matchup so many times, and I can usually bait out her riposte, and
Yeah.
then I'm able to kill her when she no longer has it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It doesn't surprise me that you'd learn the matchups quicker. And then I think a big part of being a one trick is that you would get really good at beating your counters. Like if you have a counter like Fiora, and you play 200 or 300 games of top lane ranked, I'd expect you see Fiora 70 times. You see it in a third or a fourth of your games. And a lot of players don't play Fiora, they just see her as a counter and go, I might be able to pull this off. And so you're really only losing to the good Fioras that actually know how to play the champion well. And it can actually proc something like her ultimate within a second or two, rather than chasing you halfway down the lane, struggling to get that last hit on you. So
Yeah. I feel like the game has gotten easier in some ways and more difficult in other ways. As a one trick, you know, I'm learning the matchups better and I'm getting better at the game. But if you put me on an off roll or a different champion, my gameplay completely changes. And I'd say the game is significantly more difficult for me now.
yeah, well, recently they had a bunch of items changes. They changed the map. They changed how some of the dragons work, and they added void grubs. So you've got all these 4, 5, 6 changes that are changing who's good in top lane. I've got a friend who plays a lot of Yorick, and he started taking void grubs. He takes void grubs for free at level 6 because Yorick is just so strong at taking void grubs, and the items changes have been really good for Yorick, and he's gone on maybe a 30 or 40 game win streak where he's got some losses, 5 or 6 losses and those 40 wins, and he's just cruising. I think he's got a 65% win rate right now on Yorick in the new rank season, which is pretty good. It's like, wow, that's what I want to do. I want to be playing champions. I have a 65% win rate, and he really hasn't changed his gameplay much. It's just he's adapting to the new meta. I spent about 2 hours yesterday playing with the wards with the new map, going and seeing which walls you could throw wards over, which places are better to ward, where pink should go, because yeah, they made a bunch of modifications to top lane and really changed how it feels to invade and get some deep wards on the enemy jungler.
Yeah. Do you think the map changes have made ganking easier or harder in the current meta?
In top lane.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot harder to gank top lane now. So if you're pushed up, it's probably easy to gank top. There's just a really long lane. It's really open for the enemy jungler to walk up and gank you if you're pushed up. But if you're under your tower or you're just part way under your tower, it's it's probably more difficult because you can just see them coming from earlier. The enemy jungler has to push up, and if they want to dive you, they have to go deeper into your jungler's jungle, and your jungler can show up quicker. So I feel like it's only a few seconds difference, but the few seconds is what makes a difference. It's very very safe now to be a top laner. The only caveat to that is there's a good reason for junglers to come top now with Void Grubs, and I've seen quite a few of the fast jungle clear champions like Zyra and Shyvana. They can clear their jungle twice, make it to Void Grubs, be high level, and almost be the same level as top lane, and do Void Grubs for free, and then gank you if you're out of position at some point during that kind of combo they're doing. So I was going to ask you, how do you feel about junglers like Zyra?
I feel like Zyra, although she does a lot of damage, she's extremely squishy. I feel like if you have someone like Zed or Assassin or Kha'Zix, you should just be able to go kill Zyra over and over again since she is so squishy.
Like while she's in the jungle.
Yes.
Because she's using her spells. Yeah, that was my thought as well. Like I see a lot of people complaining about how strong Brand Jungle feels. Because he just does a lot of damage in team fights. And I don't feel like Brand Jungle is as bad as people give him credit for. Because if he's in the jungle, if he's doing something like Raptors, the mid lane can flash over the wall, fight him if they've got it warded. And Brand's used his W and his Q and his E going into the Raptors just to clear it. Yeah, clear Raptors very quickly. But if you're there too, you just kill him for free.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a super tank. It's not like he can just walk away. He's pretty squishy, although he does damage. The hard thing I feel like about Brand is he's played in multiple roles. He might be played support, mid, or jungle at the moment, and sometimes maybe even ADC. The only spot where it wouldn't be common to see him, in my opinion, is top lane.
Yeah.
And he's just designed where he would be useful as a support, useful in the ADC role, useful in the mid lane role, and useful as a jungler. So it's hard to balance that kit and make it where he still does damage as a support, but doesn't do uber damage as a mid laner or a jungler or another role like that. And so I can understand people's frustrations with him doing a lot of damage, but I think he has a lot of weaknesses along with him too.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny is I think Brand would be strongest, or Zyra would be strongest at the lower elos, where you don't get invaded as much. You just get to farm. When you have a team fight, people don't respect you, and you just do a lot of damage. Whereas where you're seeing Brand and Zyra is at the higher elos and the highest elos, where you're seeing a Diamond 1 or a Challenger or a pro game clear their jungle twice within the first couple minutes and be full life, and they're showing up to objectives and ganks with their full tool set before other junglers have been able to clear their full jungle. So I just find it interesting that the elos where you would see it played the most are not where it's necessarily the strongest. Kind of going back to like Yorick. Yorick is extremely strong in iron, bronze, silver. He's probably the best champion in the game. He's very kit front loaded. They outplaying him is quite a bit easier than a lot of other champions because he has two abilities that you can just flash over, and his ultimate is just a minion.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got a lot, and it does a lot of damage, but he doesn't have a lot of outplay potential. If he throws up his wall and you flash it, he's in trouble. If he throws his shovel to get his ghouls on you and you dash it or just walk away from it, he's in trouble. And you can kill all of his minions with autos, and especially if you're playing a counterpick champion, it's really, really easy to get ahead of someone like Yorick. Whereas if they're playing Tryndamere or if they're playing something like Kayle, you'll have a lot. Those champions have a lot more control over lane, and they can kind of dictate how they want fights to go. Something like Irelia can force an initiation, where Yorick really only gets away with, if you're near him, he gets to bonk you with his shovel.
Yeah. I think that being able to play different champions can definitely help you win matchups like against Yorick. And I think that people should probably have 3 or 4 champions that they should be fairly okay at. Like they should go practice them in normals and have 10 games on them before they take them into something like ranked.
Yeah, just to read all the abilities. One thing I've noticed with a lot of players is they don't know what their skills really do. They'll say, "Yeah, I'll play Renekton." They'll play 5 or 10 games of Renekton, and Renekton's strong, and so they go, "I always win lane. Renekton's so strong at winning lane." So they won't know what Renekton's passive does. They don't know what the Rage Bar does. They just know you end up doing a lot of damage. And that's really what they're seeing is, wow, this character does a lot of damage. And so then they go towards late game and they go, well, I'm losing now. But that's probably just a team diff. And it's like, well, Renekton's really good in the early game, but he's very difficult to win the game with. Once you get to late game and you're trying to chase down 80 carries or protect your 80 carry, it's a lot more difficult to close out the match. Whereas when you're 1v1ing Nasus early, yeah, you're going to crush him. He doesn't have any moves. You have a double dash move, a really strong stun, and a ton of lifesteal. So it's just, I think that a lot of players need to take, when you say take 10 games, they really need to understand, why do you build these items? When do you build these items? What should you be trying to do in the mid game or the late game? And watch some pro players play it, or some high elo players, because I think a lot of players just have a misunderstanding of what the point of their character is. Mm-hmm. They don't understand the game through a lens of, this is how you do high elo gameplay on Renekton. They just go into quick play, win game early, and hope the enemy surrenders. And when you go into ranked and hope the enemy surrenders, you have to really win your lane for high elo players to surrender the game and give you that respect that there's no coming back. A lot of these high level players will see a Renekton and go, okay guys, we just got to get to the 30-minute mark. We have a Vayne, so we just win. Yeah. And if you're not really, really controlling the game, I think you'll start to lose on those counterpick matchups. They're not strong long term. And so we're like, when we're talking, why do you pick champions that are, that you've only played 10 times? It's because you're kind of looking for a short-term elo gain, something that is gonna help you win a high percentage of your games in the short term. So there might be an OP build or an OP counterpick, but it doesn't necessarily make you better at the game to know how to beat Poppy with Garen. And so if you know that one matchup's easy, you pick Garen and you can just beat Poppy. Does that really teach you the fundamentals of CSing, warding, roaming, counter ganking, etc.? And it just teaches you the one matchup, which isn't relevant in any of your other games.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because there's two different ways you can improve at the game in my mind. There are improving fundamentals that are good for every single champion, like CSing, like macro, understanding how the game's played. And then there's things like understanding certain champion mechanics that can give you a fighting advantage because you're able to perform that flashy play. Like, if you can insect the enemy AD carry as Lee Sin, that should be a pretty big win for your team because then the enemy AD carry could die rather quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thought when you say like Lee Sin dives the 80 carry and you're trying to win based on killing one specific player. What do you think the purpose of each role in the game is? Do you feel like it's the top lane's job to protect the 80 carry or to kill the enemy carry, or are there is it champion specific based, or is it?
I think it's based a lot around comps. You have to figure out what your comp wants to do. For example, I had a game just yesterday. Urgot was picked away from me. I was on, not a comfort pick. I mostly have been playing Urgot since I came back this last time. But I used to play Scion before, and I played Poke Scion with Comet.
Yeah.
And it was really harassing in lane, and I had Darius picked into me, and so I said, oh, I'm gonna go Poke Scion because I'm a little bit familiar with it. I know that I can sit really far back in lane, play safe, not die to Darius, and I had a Kindred mid and a Kaisa ADC. I said, if I am able to get to late game, front line for these two carries, I think we will win the game. If they're just free to auto attack, I feel like they're going to do way more damage than the enemy team. And I'm Scion. I should get like 6,000 HP and just be like a big Cho'Gath. No one should be able to one shot me.
Yeah.
And so eventually I get to that point in the game where I just frontline and make sure I'm between the enemies and my AD carry. Even if they're like flashing on my AD carry, I'm flashing in between my AD carry and the Darius and slowing him and stunning him. And that was my role for that game. That was my responsibility. But if I was playing something different, like an assassin, maybe like Rengar, I would feel like I need to go one shot their backline. And so having a well rounded team comp and figuring out what your team comp wants to do is very important for the purpose of each role in the game.
Yeah, I agree. And something to note about what you're talking about is you have to look at the team comp very very early on, like in the draft phase, because as a top laner you're oftentimes the last pick or the second to last pick, and so you're filling out the final part of your team and you're the last person to kind of build a counter to the enemy's team. And so it seems like it's very important for top lane to have an understanding of, if I pick Fiora here, it's a good choice, and if I pick Kayle here, it's a bad choice. You have to understand what your strengths are in a 1v1 against the top lane, but also your strengths in a 2v2 with your jungle versus the top lane and their jungle, and how you can fight the enemy AD carry. Like, a good example for me is I play a lot of Renekton, and just a trend with Renekton for the past 10 years is that Renektons really struggle with killing Vayne. And Vayne has the easiest time ever killing Renekton. And as a Renekton main, that's frustrating because Vayne has always been strong. She is very, very strong character, whether she's played at top lane or at bottom lane. And so I always ban Vayne, even though it's not my lane opponent. It's very rare that you see it top lane into Renekton, but you see it bot lane into Renekton often. If I pick Renekton top, a lot of AD carry mains will go, oh, I'll just pick Vayne. That's an easy one.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been finding that trying to round out your team comp in the champion select, that's when it's important. And then I had this thought that a lot of high elo players seem to know exactly what to flash in team fights. They do it perfectly, seamlessly. You see you see they flash it perfectly and they dodge abilities like magicians. And I really believe that what they do is before the game starts in champion select, they know, okay, I'm taking cleanse for Asholt, and I'm going to use flash. Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, no problem. That I'm going to use flash whenever Morgana tries to bind me. And they just know that if they use both of those things correctly, they can all in the enemy bot lane. So, and then when they actually implement it, they know where the enemy jungler is, they know where their jungler is, and they can just perform a 2v2 fight seamlessly because of planning that they did all the way back in Champion Select when they picked their character, when they picked their summoners, when they picked their runes. And that kind of goes into, how do you feel about third party apps? Do you feel like they're healthy for the game?
That's a tough one. Third party apps, I think, can be a help and also a hurt. It makes it very easy to just say, "Oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it
First,
every game."
let's define what third party apps are.
So when I think of third party apps, I think of things like Porofessor that tell you what runes to go, will time flash timers for you or your whole team if everyone has Porofessor.
Or tell you what items to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find it very interesting because uh, when I was the best I've ever been at the game, those kinds of tools didn't exist in the capacity they exist now. When I was very good at the game, what you would do is you would learn a matchup, like you would play against Renekton over and over and over, and you would slowly learn, okay, in this matchup, I win if I can go to late game. Or I win if he goes damage, I go armor. Or if he goes armor, I go damage. And you can learn these different kinds of matchups for all the champions. And then if you get killed once or twice, you still know how to build your kit. Whereas with Porofessor doesn't really keep track of, oh, he's got 2 deaths. Well, you need to stop building DPS items and immediately start building armor. It doesn't tell you that. And so players get in these ruts where they go, well, I either win super, super hard or I lose super, super hard. And it's a limitation of my champion. It's like, well, I think you're making all of these choices based on this app that isn't teaching you the game very well. You're trying to learn the game and it's just teaching you, just go the same thing every game.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're a brand new player, going the same build every game is fine.
Yeah.
But like if I'm playing against Teemo top, I need to build Force of Nature or something like that that gives me more magic resistance to someone like Teemo.
What, or a good example is, what if it's AD Teemo? Then you don't need to do that, and you need to change the build. Yeah. So I think the thing I've seen a lot lately is players don't understand what all of the runes in the game do. Like there are what 9 times 5 no 12 times 5 runes, so there's like 60 runes in the game. Then you have the little stat runes as well, so we're talking like 90 runes in the game or so. And if you ask players, okay, what are all the runes, list them. Or even if I show you where they are, what do they do? Or if I tell you what their names are, what characters do you pick them on? I bet there's players that even on their main champion, their number one champion that they play every day or every other day, they don't know what all the runes do. So.
Oh yeah, like for I would almost never go first strike on Urgot because there's usually going to be someone longer range than me that could hit me first.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't think it's a very strong rune on him. And so it's probably a good idea that I know what it does, but
for sure.
I probably am never going to choose that for that champion.
Yeah. Well, it's this. Yeah, and well, that's like a really important one because you need to change the whole way you play the game if they have first strike, because you don't want to be feeding them 15, 30, 45 gold a minute the whole game. It's and this kind of goes back towards, let's say you see Senatop. How many times have you seen Senatop ever?
Probably like 3-4 times.
Yeah, and same thing for me. I've seen it like 3 or 4 times. And the problem is that if you just let her stack on you, at the end of the game, she's going to have 200 farm, 100 stacks plus, and she's just going to be killing everyone on your team because you just fed her stacks in first strike.
Oh, yeah.
And so the thought is, what do you do when you don't know what a champion does? How do you deal with that? If you don't understand a matchup, it's the first time you've seen it. What's your game plan in ranked?
Generally, I play more on the passive side in that scenario. I try to manipulate the wave in front of my tower and hold it there so I don't get ganked. And the goal is just to generally go even if I don't know the matchup.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is oftentimes if I see something that's unconventional, if I feel like the reason it's unconventional is oftentimes because it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to things like ganks, or it's really, really weak into certain counter picks. Like if you see a Senna pick top, there's probably a handful of really good counters. Like I bet Aurelia does really well into Senna top. Haven't played the matchup, but that's just an assumption. So you play something that champions or counters the champion at like a fundamental level of like, well, it's an 80 carry style champion. If I go a really sticky assassin like Zed or Irelia, I don't necessarily have to even do well in lane because I'll be able to kill them in the mid game, kill them in the late game, because you just counter their kit. Or you ask for help from your jungler and say, hey, look, Senna's pushing all the way to my tower and I'm gonna freeze it up there. I don't really have a choice because I'm, losing my lane, but this should be an easy gank. And you just look at it as, even if you don't understand the champion, that you kind of know, okay, this champion has limitations, or I would see it all the time. The top picks for top lane is like Aatrox. Aatrox doesn't have a lot of counters. He's very, very strong. And so you see a lot of people first pick him when they don't know their matchup, and he's very difficult to gank. He lands 2 or 3 abilities. He's full life and kills your team while becoming full life and regenning HP. So,
yeah, I think that if you don't know the matchup, it really helps if you have jungler help too.
Yeah.
That can literally make all the difference. I think that's the reason that I choose to try and freeze the wave outside my tower, is to give the best opportunity to try and kill someone, whether it's Aatrox or Senna. If I don't understand that matchup, I want to give the best possible chance of us ganking that lane and having success.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of interesting as a top laner. There's probably a lot of matchups you've never seen, but as a jungler, you've probably seen every single champion played. Like if you're a top laner, how many times have you laned against Karma? Once, maybe ever.
Yeah.
Janna once, maybe ever. Yuumi literally 0 times, right? Like obviously you're not going to see a solo top Yuumi in your games.
Yeah, otherwise they're trolling.
But your jungler has seen Yuumi. They've seen it at bot lane. They've seen Malzahar in mid lane, and so they know what Malzahar does at top lane, and they might have a pretty good and accurate idea of, oh, we can beat this guy. Your Renekton is way stronger than the mid lanes I've seen in the past, and we'll just kill this guy. no problem if he's pushed up this far. So I do think that jungler help. It's kind of the role of the jungler to assist with those pressure points, and they can create wins. And sometimes it's, I think if they can identify that you're just uncomfortable with the matchup, sometimes it's just better to not help you. Just let you suffer, because who cares how much farm Karma gets at top lane? She's never going to carry the game the way a Kayle could.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think the jungler not coming sometimes and ganking other lanes is way better.
Yeah.
Me and my friends have had discussions about this, but ganking bot lane as a jungler is just 2 kills if you have a very successful gank, compared to if you gank top lane, you only get 1 kill. So if you have the opportunity to gank bot lane and get 2 kills, or gank top and get 1 kill, you should always go with the 2 kills in my mind, because that's 600 gold compared to 300.
Yeah, I sort of agree, but I feel like it depends on the matchup. So for top lane, you might have Garen versus Darius, and if whoever gets the first kill might get all of the kills in that lane, it just becomes a very trivial matchup where you say, well, I've got 10 or 20 more AD than you for the rest of the match. I hit my first item first, I get level 2 boots first, and this is just a very easy lane for me now. Whereas for bottom lane, it's such a high DPS glass cannon lane. For a lot of the lanes, you could get your AD carry 7 kills, and they still might die to a Lee Sin Q easily.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild how fast your AD carry can die. Whereas if you've got a Garen up top who's 7-0, he's just never going to die to a Darius. He would really have to make a lot of choices that would lead him to dying, over a fight. So
Yeah, I think that's just one of the role differences too, where an ADC is almost meant to be a glass cannon, because they might hit for 1,000 an auto attack, where Garen, I'm lucky to hit for like 300 an auto attack late game.
yeah, well, that's one thing I've noticed about AD carries is, as you get to higher elos, I think people have more build diversity in every lane. So an AD carry at low elo, they probably go full damage 100% of their games, or something close to that. And as they get better, as you get into diamond, as you get into masters, you start to see AD carries that go, oh, I don't want attack speed boots here. I want armor, and I want to focus on survival and team fights. So I'm going to get a shield bow, and then I'm going to build a bloodthirster, and they build those kinds of items. They do a lot less damage, but if you're fighting people like Zyra or Kha'Zix or Brand, it doesn't really matter. You're just trying to survive. Versus if you're fighting something like a Volibear, or like I don't know, something tanky like an Ornn, you need that damage to really punch through, and it's your role to kill them.
Yeah, I think that's something where high elo players, that's what's improving their elo, is being able to itemize their builds according to the enemy team and their own team.
Yeah.
But I think it's almost every role. Every role is going to look at team comps and champions on the enemy team and make decisions on how to best play. One of the traps me and my friends always fall into is we might pick 5 AD and then they last pick Rammus. And I think it is a winnable game still, even though Rammus destroys AD champions. But if I build Black Cleaver and usually some lifesteal so I don't end up killing myself on hitting him, then I can normally do pretty well, even if he has heal cut. It's just something where I shred his armor, I'm not getting one shot by thorns from Thornmail, and were able to kill the Rammus and then run over the rest of their team.
Yeah. Yeah, and changing just the way you play and the way you build based on how your team comp is, because I think a lot of top laners run into this trap where they go kind of a bruiser build in every matchup, every game. And I think there's this idea that, oh, I can't go tank. If I go tank, I'm useless late game, which might be true. You might be useless late game, but if you have a Vayne bottom or a Kog'Maw bottom, it doesn't really matter if you're useless. Your job is just to protect her for the whole game. And so if you see that Vayne go 3-0 in the first 4 minutes, you can switch your build. You haven't really committed to a damage build, and maybe you go 0-1 in your lane and you go, all I have to do here is not die. I'm going to buy level 2 boots, get some armor. I'm going to buy a Sunfire cape, and I am just going to tank it up for the next 20 minutes. And when we go late game, my only job is to just match the enemy top laner under my tower. And that's oftentimes where I see people struggling, is they're inconsistent about doing their job. Like the job of top lane is oftentimes to do the low priority thing on the map, like protect bot lane turret or protect top lane turret. They're not in the jungle fight fighting over Baron in half the fights. They're at bottom clearing minions, while the enemy top lane is also at bot clearing minions. And if either one goes to top, then they're going to lose their second tier turret.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 1,000 gold right away. So yeah, I think a lot of players really struggle with the idea of moving around the map and throughout the game kind of understanding their job. A lot of mid laners are supposed to clear the side lanes and let their AD carries move to the middle. And part of the reason why is their mid laners aren't typically building full glass cannon blow up builds. They're building bruiser hybrid type builds or wave clear builds. And your AD carry might actually be all damage. And so they're very, very squishy. They're very unsafe. And so they like the safety of being centralized on the map with a support, with a jungler. And oftentimes it's better for them to be near all of the objectives because they matter so much in team fights.
So you bring up supports too around AD carries. I like the idea of the support protecting the AD carry. How do you think that differs from a caster support like Lulu or Janna protecting the AD carry compared to a tank support like Leona or Alistar?
Yeah, the way I think about it for basically the whole team is, if you have a 9-3 AD carry, the whole game is protecting that 9-3 AD carry that's just farmed really well, is getting really fed, has good items. You just want to protect them. And so there's a couple ways you can protect them. You can all in your opponents, you can take skill shots for them, you can just in general do the dangerous parts of fights for them. And on both enchanter supports, mage supports, and tank supports, you could be doing the same things. You're just standing in front of your AD carry trying to take hits and CC, bruisers that are running up to you. But if your AD carry is, instead of being 9-3, they're maybe 2-9, then maybe the focus kind of translates to, well, my job is to dive the enemy AD carry and stop them from doing any damage that they could be doing. Try to deny as much as I can there. And someone like Lulu might do that same thing by, instead of supporting your AD carry, you might focus on supporting someone like your jungler. Like if you have a Kindred jungler, or if you have a Lee Sin that's just killing players, you might buff them up and power them up to do their job much better, while still providing some support for your AD carry, because even a 2-9 AD carry with 200 CS is hitting hard. Mm-hmm. But they might not be the focus of the team anymore. You might not want to spend your ult keeping them alive from Talon when they're not even going to kill Talon. Like why what's the point of spending two characters' abilities on protecting a player that can't 1v2?
Yeah. They're just going to get one shot. Is there any point to blowing any of your abilities to try and save them?
Yeah. And I think it's frustrating for a lot of the AD carry players because oftentimes they do get in that situation where they're getting chased down by two assassins, and that's every team fight. They're getting chased down by two assassins, and they might be 9-3, and they go, "Where is my support? Where is my jungler?" And the support and jungler are smashing the enemy AD carry, who's a 2-9 AD carry, and you're like, "No, we win if you just stay next to me. You don't need to kill her. You need to kill this Talon. You need to kill this Camille. That's who's winning them the game. And if you keep me alive, I'll kill them in 4 or 5 or 6 auto attacks. But if I die, that Camille will kill everyone on our team." And I see that a lot where players have one mode of playing. Like a good example is a lot of Yorick players go, "Well, I just split push." Or a lot of Nasus players go, "I just split push. And that's all I do." They don't have any other plan throughout the game. They might be 9-0. And they can kill anyone on the opposing team, and they're just split pushing the whole game, and they might lose the game while doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very surprising to me that they don't really understand the game at a, okay, let's roam around the map, get control of objectives, get all the dragons, get Elder Drake, get Baron, let's take down top lane turret, and then you can TP bottom and blow up the inhibitor. But we need to set up a push at bottom first. Like, they're not good at the full macro idea and the scale. They just go, "Well, I'm 9-0. I just bonk whoever's in my lane and I should win, right?" And it's like, well, if that your allies can't win a 4v4, but you're 9-0, maybe you guys just crush a 5v5. And if Poopy or Poppy or Shen or something goes bottom lane, are they going to take your tower in the time that a 5v4 with Nasus would take the top lane?
Yeah,
I think people struggle with adapting to the current state of the game based on their farm and their KDA and their team comps. People won't think, okay, I need to, if I'm on Nasus, I need to show up to the team fight because the enemy AD carry has 9 kills. If you just wither that one person, you probably win that fight. And if you have enough damage to beat down someone like Ornn, then he becomes irrelevant and your team can just win the whole game as long as you're playing smart.
I think that's a very interesting thing. What it makes me think of is different ways you can win the game, like with a split push, with 1-3-1, with a team fight. And I think that champions like Yorick are so pigeonholed into split push mentality that if they're 9-0, they could show up and do any of those things and win the game. Like, if you're 9-0, you could still team fight as Yorick and win the game. And that might be the way to win. Like, you don't necessarily have to split push to win the game as Yorick. It might be the way you win 90% of your games, but there are definitely games where team fighting and shifting that to a 5v5 or a 5v4 is way better for you.
Yeah. So how do you feel about, let's say you just feel like you're in loser's queue and every game you've queued up 5 or 6 games in a row and you just have these top lanes that are just trying to split push and they're just feeding, they're going 0-7. Your mid laners are playing silly, doing something drastically losing you a lot of games. How do you feel like you climb out of that? How do you change that from happening when you're, say, bottom lane? Your bottom AD carry, your top lane's 0-7. What are you supposed to do?
I think it's one of those things where everyone feels like they get in loser's queue sometimes, where they're just going to lose 20 games in a row and there's nothing that they can do about it. But I always try and remember there are people too. Like, those are real people in the top lane. If they're able to do it to my top laner, I, as an ADC, should be able to do it to their bottom laners.
Yeah,
Like,
I just feel like top lane though is so volatile. Like if you're if you're playing Lulu Jinx versus Janna Caitlyn, that lane might just sit there and nobody dies the whole game. You get up to 300 farms some games, and maybe there's 2 deaths. And in those deaths didn't change the lane at all. Whereas at top, sometimes people are dying level 1, and it's just going crazy right off the rip. The first minute of the game, it's already been decided. Maybe they got level 2 ganked by a jungler, and Janna Caitlyn is just so resilient to ganks that, yeah, if they have like a Shaco and they're trying to cheese gank Caitlyn might just kill him in a 3v2. He's just a free kill. Whereas at top, Shaco shows up and you just lose. Oftentimes that's exactly what happens. You just die instantly.
I think it's one of those things where as long as you're playing your best, you'll break out of loser's queue eventually. I think it's most of the time people get this mentally in their heads that, oh, I'm in loser's queue, I'm not going to try my best, or I'm going to surrender early when my team throws up an FF vote.
Yeah, I have felt that. I think a lot of the loser queue mentality is people surrendering games that are still winnable. Like, you can have an 0-9 top lane and win. As long as that 0-9 top lane is still doing their job. What's their job? Protect your towers from the 9-0 top lane. And it's like, okay, as long as they're protecting the tower, that's fine. You can give another kill to that top laner. You can donate a kill every 2 or 3 minutes, as long as the top lane is just not ever able to blow up your second tier turret. And I see that oftentimes with these later picks like Nasus or Kayle, where they go 0-7, 0-8, and they really should lose the whole game, but they get 1 kill on the enemy. And so they're 1-9. They got a big shutdown, and they hit their PowerPoint like level 16 or something, and now they win every fight for the rest of the game. And it just takes them 25 minutes to get there, and people will surrender just based off your KDA.
That's weird. I mean, it's definitely one of those things where if Kayle hits level 16, she's probably just going to win the game at that point solo.
Yeah, as long as she's got farm.
Yeah. If she has 4 warm bodies near her that the enemies also have to hit, and she can just auto attack, 3 times a second at 800 damage apiece, she's probably gonna team wipe.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the loser queue kind of mentality is players that they play with a lot of volatility in their own play, and they oftentimes are causing it in ways that maybe isn't clear. So a good example is, let's say I'm playing support and I'm not swapping with my top lane. So I never swap with my top lane for pick order, and so my top lane always gets counterpicked. And I go, well, my top lane sucks every single game. My top lane sucks. They always lose. And it's like, well, there's one really good way that you can make them win in a high percentage of their games. If you give your top lane counterpick anytime you're on red side, they get to counterpick for sure, and they probably win that matchup 65% of the time. They're just playing something they're comfortable with against somebody who's playing something that isn't good into what your top lane picked for you. And in that same domain, let's say you're not swapping with your top laner, so they pick, say, something safe like Aatrox, or maybe they go tanky and they go Malphite. And after they've already picked Malphite and the champion picks go down the line, you go, well, I just feel comfortable playing something really tanky like Braum. And so you go Braum, and you just have 3 or 4 tanks on your team. And so you could be causing this issue where you don't have any damage, and you say, well, I'm not comfortable on damage. And it's like, well, you need to pick early. Let your team know, hey, I'm picking this Braum. You guys pick some kind of mage. And then go back to the, hey, we have 5 ADs on the team. It's like, did nobody want to play AP? And the guy at first picks like, I can play anything. But you signed up and you didn't tell me what you were going to pick.
Yeah. No one declared their intent of champions they wanted to play.
Yeah.
Like, if he's seeing that everyone's picking an AD champion later on than him, he's probably going to say, oh, I should probably pick something like Mordekaiser that's AP. That way, if they do build all armor, I'm just going to smash and win this game for us.
Yeah. So, what are you doing specifically to improve at the game right now?
I think the biggest thing is going back to figuring out what my team wants to do. As Urgot, in most of my games, I feel like I have 2 options. I have options to split push and options to team fight. And sometimes I really need to join more team fights and be a bigger effect. Because as Urgot, if I am able to shoot my ult, pull someone into the belly grinder, and fear 3 people, that can be game-winning team fight right there. Yeah. But if I'm off in a solo lane split pushing, I'm never going to get a 3-man fear. And so something that I'm always trying to do now is work around my team, be the front line for my AD carry, be able to kill the enemies and make those big Urgot plays. Or if I'm not playing Urgot, play Sion, play Malphite, be that front line and work on making sure my ADC stays safe and I am helping them kill the enemy team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So yours is very like in the game focused, trying to improve like your strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And my mentality for how I'm trying to improve has been, I'm looking for like tips and tricks videos for like how to improve your warding and how to improve your runes and learning what all the runes do and learning what all the items do and when to change your item builds. And so I've been spending a lot of time studying just the costs of items, what kind of damage they do, and when to build them in specific matchups. So I that's what I'm focusing on. I've been thinking about doing skill capped, not a sponsor, because they have a bunch of these videos on. They just have simple videos that just teach you one mechanic, and I've been trying to learn that kind of gameplay because I think my general, just me playing the game in a comfortable setting, not trying my best, I feel comfortable winning team fights. But when I'm in a 1v1 level 1, I'm playing Garen, they're playing Riven, I don't know how to win the matchup. I don't know what items do I buy if I kill her, what items do I buy if I die. When I used to play, a really common build was cloth armor and 5 health potions level 1, and that's what you would build into something like Riven if you weren't comfortable with the matchup. It's really safe. You had a ton of HP, at like 400 or 500 extra HP, and then on your first back you get a big defensive item. I can't remember, maybe you'd go like Bramble Vest or something, but you would go I don't even know if Bramble Vest existed back then.
Yeah, but you'd go some armor item.
You'd go an armor item early, yeah, and it would be just so strong because the armor scaled really well with health potions. So if Riven's doing 10% less damage to you because of the armor, and you're healing 300 or 400 or 500 health from the health potions, those two are synergizing really well. And now everybody just builds Doran's Blade or Doran's Ring. Mm-hmm. And it's just very like vanilla matchups. And I keep thinking to myself, okay, how do I get an edge here? Like, I need an edge that's not me just outplaying her. Maybe I can outplay her, but do I want to take that high variance all in at level 2 or level 3 and dive them under the turret or something? That's scary. If you die, you might lose the game, versus if you just recall there and go get 2 long swords. Maybe that's all you need to win.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where I think there's several ways to improve at the game. Some of it might be, am I building the right items early game? Because early game can have a huge effect on late game. If I walk out a lane 5-0, I mean, it almost doesn't matter what I do. I should be able to win that game.
Yeah. Well, that goes towards something I've been thinking about in my games a lot more frequently. When I used to play, I don't even know if shutdown gold was a thing. If it was, it wasn't drastic like it is now. Like you can get 1,000 gold from a single kill, and the game just rubber bands back to, oh, the other team's winning now.
Yeah.
And you've got things like the tower objective gold. So they blow it up and they get 400 or 500 gold, whatever it is, across their team. And it used to be that it was really hard to swing a game back unless you full team wiped them. If you could win a 5v5, the death timers were so long in season 2, they were like 90 seconds or something. In 90 seconds, you can win the whole game.
Yeah,
in that kind of time.
March down 5 towers and win the game.
Yeah, even if you're way behind, and even if only like 1 or 2 people survive, you could just keep pushing.
Yeah, the
X Peke, get all the towers down, and you can teleport in late game and win the Nexus. And that's not a thing anymore, because if you kill the 5-0 Garen, you get 900 gold, and now you're back in the game. Some games.
Something that makes me think of is I think there are a lot of people, instead of winning the game, they go try and get Baron. Do you see that a lot in your games?
So I usually try to take the reins when that sort of thing happens. I go, no, go win. And I ping it and I communicate it, and that's something that I really put a lot of time and effort into. What is the best play? And like, I could be mistaken in some plays, but the way I think about it is this: Baron is to help you crack the enemy base in an even game. You have a slight edge, you can kill them, you go take Baron, that gives you 1,500 gold, and now you can buff up all the minions and finish a game where it's pretty close. And you can go get the first inhib. And I oftentimes see people have the choice between taking a tower in the inhib for free and then recalling and going to Baron and being there on time to fight over it again, or going straight to Baron, taking it for free, and then having to fight over the inhibs and the towers. And I think it just kind of depends on the situation, because a good example of what sometimes happens is you're heading towards winning the game, you take the tower, then you take the inhib, then you go to the inner towers, you take one of the inner towers, you're about to go on the Nexus, and the enemy team wipes you. They go do Baron, and now you're in a really bad spot because they got shut down gold on killing your surviving teammates that were pushing the Nexus, and they got the Baron, and now they can crack your base and they can win the game. So I just think push down buildings when it's not going to make Baron vulnerable. I see people overstaying after they take an inhib, after they take a tower, and oftentimes you only need one person to kind of lurk around the base, and that person can say, well, if they go Baron right now, I take bottom inhib as well. So yeah, maybe they get Baron, but you get mid inhib, bot inhib, and that's just so much pressure that it's going to be hard to overcome for the rest of the game. Even if they get Baron, kind of won.
I mean, having 2 inhibs down is almost game ending.
Yeah.
Like, that's when you look at, if we kill 2 or 3 of their members, we can probably just win this game if we have 2 of their inhibs down.
Yeah, but it doesn't really feel like the game's over if you have your inhibs up and they have Baron. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
It does. It's like, okay, they could push and it might be difficult, but we could survive this. We can win. Whereas the game just feels over the second that 2 inhibs go down. Like 1 inhib is hard, 2 inhibs the game feels over.
I mean, 3 inhibs then feels like it's impossible because now 2 super minions are going down each
Yeah.
lane.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's hard. You can just practically let the minions just end the game. You just have to be near them.
Yeah, and if you go take Baron, then the buff from Baron just powers them up so much. Yeah, I've seen that type of thing before where you can come back from that game, but it's probably 1 in 100 games or less
Yeah.
where you come back from a game where you have 2 or 3 inhibs down and your team's just struggling. It's uncommon.
So, when do you think is an appropriate time to surrender a game?
I basically surrender when I'm not having fun anymore.
Is it different when you're playing like ranked solo queue versus playing with your friends?
I do think it's different. So in ranked solo queue, it's just me. It's just I'm the only one playing. Maybe I play duo queue, and if my friend's not enjoying the game, then I'm happy to surrender because I don't really care about an individual game's MMR or the elo that you get from it. I care about learning the game and improving and gaining elo over 500 or 600 games. One surrender doesn't matter, but I don't surrender. I really like if you were to look at how I surrender when the game's definitely over. You know, all 5 of us are dead and they have 4 people up and they're pushing our nexus. I'll surrender.
Yeah.
You know, or they have a 21 kill Katarina and my bot lane's screaming about it and they just don't want to play anymore, then I'll say, okay, I'll surrender. You know, like if your whole team is already given up, you're not going to win against that 21 kill Katarina anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were trying, it would be extremely difficult to beat that 21 kill Katarina anyways. There's just no way.
I just think it's interesting because I don't like surrendering games. Like,
Yeah.
I almost think every game is comebackable.
Oh yeah, I think that's true. But the question is it comebackable because you played well and you're learning? Or is it because the enemy's trolling or maybe they DC? Like, yeah, if the whole enemy team DCs all at once, then you can come back from any game.
Yeah.
But the reality is that you haven't improved from that. It's just an elo difference. You know, do
Yeah.
I care about the elo difference? Personally, I don't care. You know, the stat that I see reflected on my account, it can be silver or it can be diamond. That doesn't matter. I want to learn the game and I'm passionate about having these fun 1v1 matchups. And what I find is silver elo games are not interesting. You know, there was a point maybe 4 or 5 years ago where I would play Garen top every game with my friends in quick play. And in quick play, I think I had a 98% win rate on Garen in a 1v1. I like it was some atrocious number where I would win my lane every lane. You know, and I wasn't even diamond then. I was just probably like high platinum. But I'm playing with my friends that are in bronze and silver, and so my opponent every game was silver. And so I'm just out CSing them. I had games where my opponent was 17 CS and I was like 100.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 4 kills and they were 4 deaths. And they just couldn't play the game. And those are the type of games where if I was on their team, I'd be like, let's just surrender. My friend at top is not having fun. Like I don't care about winning.
Yeah. Do you think playing with your friends in something like quick play or draft, you know, where there can be huge elo disparities, is that really fun gameplay?
I don't know about really fun. I think it's good and healthy to go play some of those games because you might learn something about, like, you might play a champion you don't know or play a different style, or you play against players that are doing troll builds, like, say, a green Ezreal build where they're going really tanky at top lane. And you might learn something from that matchup. And yeah, you won't see that in ranked very often, but you might learn something fundamental about the game that might help you. And so I see that kind of thing. I do think is valuable to play, and it's fun to play with my friends at top lane, with your friends at in an elo disparity. um, just just to learn something new. I don't think it's a good way to like hone your build and become a master of the game, but you can learn something from it.
Yeah, I think like when I play normals, quick play draft, it's just one of those things where I'm never being challenged in lane as much as I would in ranked.
Yeah.
I'm never tested on every CS that I'm trying to hit. Where ranked, I feel like sometimes I have a battle for every CS I hit.
The
That
whole
person
game.
tries to hit me back, and it's like it's just almost completely two separate games. And it's like
Yeah.
just playing in two different elos, like silver compared to emerald. The game can be so different in how it's played.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too. I was watching a pro match a couple weeks ago, and the pros just they didn't take fights where they didn't have their jungler. They just didn't fight at
Mhm.
all. And I'm looking at it from like a solo queue or like even like a quick play perspective where I'm like, dude, you win that fight. Like you can see like you win that fight, go hit him. And the reason they're not hitting him is like, well, I don't know where the enemy jungler is, and if I dash in and all in and I die, it's really bad.
Yeah.
But so they're just waiting. They just wait for their jungler to show up. And oftentimes, what I was seeing is stuff like the enemy jungler would show up, and they wouldn't have used their abilities, and they're in a situation where they're already winning, and they do something like kill the jungler 2v1, and that's what you're seeing at high elo is they're saving all of their moves for the jungle gank that they know is an inevitability. And in quick play, people just run in and use everything.
Yeah.
Every fight, they're just fighting, 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 fighting. Even level 1, you see something like a Wukong at top, and he'll dash in and smack you until he's dead.
Yeah. I think there are definitely some ways that you have to change how you look at your abilities when you get into higher elos.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm playing Tristana mid, I never W unless it's like I see the enemy junglers ganking me and I need to get out.
Yeah.
Because Tristana W jumps almost that whole lane. I
Yeah.
can be like in range of hitting that person's tower, jump almost the whole lane, and be just outside my tower range. It's
Yeah.
like as long as I never jump in with my W, I can always do that.
Yeah. Yeah, saving abilities for opportunity rather than just using them when they're on cooldown. Like I think there's a lot of different ways to use abilities in lane. You could like use them actively every time they come off cooldown. And you might do that with something like Victor's E, where you're just laser beaming the whole wave every time it's up. You're just laser beaming players and waves and going for trades. Whereas something like Victor's W, you only use that when you're being ganked or all in.
Yeah.
You just hold that ability. And a lot of the mana costs are reflected across champions for those kinds of abilities. I watch people that will use all their mana on Jhin for using his W or his traps, and they're just using it every time it's off cooldown, and they're always out of mana. And I'm like, your W does like an auto attack's worth of damage.
Yeah, it doesn't do a whole lot.
If you have half your mana in lane, then you can combo. You can do big plays where if you get all in, you throw a trap down, you root them, you auto them, and you're using your Q actively. And if you burn through all of your mana, you're just sitting duck, just waiting in lane.
I think there's also champions like Mordekaiser that don't have any mana, and you should practically be spamming most of those abilities all the time. Like you should be using his Q to push the wave if you're trying to push it under tower.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Yeah, that's a good example. Is there's manaless champions where you say, well, they can use all of their abilities without using any mana, but Mordekaiser might want to save his pull for when he gets ganked, because you could pull backwards, send the enemy away from you while you're walking away from them in lane. Or you might want to have the pull for an all-in, so you get ganked, you press your R on somebody, and then you need that pull in order to do the full play there. You don't want to be just throwing it actively in lane and then you get ganked and it's down. So it kind of depends on the character and the situation, you know. I think even on the manaless champions, like a good example is Garen. Garen's Q clears slows and his W gives you tenacity for stuns. And if you, in a lot of matchups, you would just want to save one of those the whole lane.
Yeah.
You know, you're playing against something like Nasus. If your Q is up, they can't gank you. Like Nasus won't catch up to you unless the jungler is somebody that can really punish Garen.
Yeah.
So.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you how the games are affecting you. Like, when you play like 4 or 5 or 6 games in a day, or over the course of a month, you're playing 100 games.
Well, right now I'm climbing, so I feel like I have a fairly high win rate when I'm playing solo by myself. So, grinding games when I'm winning, I feel like I am going up, but the more games I play in a single day, I also just go on autopilot.
Yeah.
Where I'm not really thinking about how I'm playing the game. I'm going the same build, not thinking about what I can do to win the game. I'm just saying, okay, I'm playing Urgot. I'm just hitting the CS.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just getting like burnt out of playing games. I don't even play that many games, you know, and I'm working 40 hours a week and I'm just getting tired of that. I've started this YouTube channel and I'm trying to get like 7 or 8 videos out a week. And so I'm not really having trouble getting a video out every day, but I am having trouble playing 3 ranked games every single day. Like going in and just saying, okay, I gotta go play 3 ranked games. I gotta go play Garen, you know, and I just smack minions for 2 hours, you know, and it's stressful because, you know, if I'm doing poorly, that means I have to put more effort into studying, you know, more practice. And there's like something on the line there where, yeah, I'm winning a lot of my games. I think right now I have a 50% win rate in ranked. And the game, I have a pretty bad loss record. I've played probably 20 of my games with my friend who's also a top lane main. And we lost a lot of games. We lost 62% of our games. And really kind of tanked my elo, but it doesn't matter. The win rate doesn't matter because the goal is to learn the game. Yeah. But when you see those big elo losses, it's frustrating, and you're like, man, I gotta grind back 100, 200 MMR again and get back into rank. This hard. So
I think it is hard, especially when you're losing a lot of games. Having a duo partner, I think, can really affect you when you're grinding a lot of games, for better or for worse, because you can blame duo partners, but duo partners can also help you a lot as well.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is I think if the purpose of the ranked is that you want to get long-term gains, I think a duo partner might actually hurt that, because the duo partner might just carry you. Like I've seen friends that are gold elo, and I look at their ranking. I'm like, oh, you've played 55 games or 60 games of ranked, whatever, and they just don't know how to play the game. And I'm like, how are you gold? Like, you don't know anything about the game other than killing. You know, like, this is like stuff you see at low silver, bronze. And I realized, oh, they've played 50 of those 60 games in duo queue with somebody who's platinum. And that person probably actually is platinum and is carrying them through every single game. And they're not learning that they need to change their play style. They can't just be, but a good example is I had one friend that was playing Shyvana support a lot. Shyvana support's not good. That's a
No.
joke. That's a joke meme thing. That's not going to win you games through Diamond consistently. Like, yeah, maybe if you were a challenger level player, you could make it work. But when you're learning the game, the fundamentals, and you're trying to climb out of iron or bronze, you need to be playing a recommended support like Leona, like Nautilus, or Lulu, or Nami.
I mean, there are things that will do what Shyvana does, but just better on the support page.
Yep.
Because Shyvana has her E to throw a fireball, and it's like, sure, if Shyvana's full AP and she's big, she'll one-shot people with that fireball in her ult form.
Yep.
But it's like, okay, if you play Brand, you could just one-shot better.
Yep. Well, and the other thing is I oftentimes see these people that are doing the off meta builds, and they say things like, well, if I get a couple kills, then I can snowball. And it's like, well, you're support, so you should not be getting a couple kills. Your AD carry can snowball with a couple kills.
Mm-hmm.
So play something that helps your AD carry, or you should play AD carry. And I don't know, how do you feel about trolls in the game? Like, I feel like I run into a lot more trolls at lower elos. Like, you're in silver, and you get these people that say, like, hey, I'm gonna go Teemo support, we can win this. You need to, like, respect the power of the blind and how good it is, and we're gonna win because of my big plays. And then they go 0-3 in lane, and then they're just sitting invisible, soaking XP during fights. And you're like, dude, go play a real character.
Yeah. I think there are different kinds of trolls.
Yeah.
I think there are people who run it down and are like 0-20 playing something that is meta, like Orin top.
Yeah.
And they just keep running it down, or they run down mid lane and just purposely tower dive even though they're 0-15 at that point. Those people, I think, should definitely be banned when they're intentionally feeding. Like, I don't think there's any reason to be 0-20 at the 20-minute mark in the game.
Yeah, true. Oh, totally agree.
There should be no reason, no excuses to feed that much in that little amount of time.
Yeah, and oftentimes those players are like screaming profanities in chat and stuff too. Like, they're the worst kind of player.
I mean, and then you have other trolls that are picking stuff off meta.
Yeah.
And I think it really depends. Like, they could honestly be trying something. Now, if they're trying something like that in normals, I don't care. Let's just surrender the game and move past them.
Yeah.
If they're trying that in ranked and they've never done it before, like, never tried it, never played it, then it's like, okay, I consider that trolling, and that should be reportable in my mind.
It kind of depends, because I see some lanes where I think to myself, oh, I could see you're playing duo queue with your friend, or they're playing duo queue with their friend, and they go like Jarvan, Lee Sin bottom, or like Poppy, Maokai bottom, and they're just going for kills early, or Yasuo, Yone bottom. And it's like, this isn't good. It's not going to improve them, but it's kind of a cheese that's kind of silly and fun. And, some people just don't play normals. They just play ranked, and they say, well, I always play ranked. This is what I'm practicing, and I'm at this elo. And it's weird because oftentimes they just get crushed. It's like, yeah, every time you play Teemo support, you lose, and then you grind back up to Diamond 1 playing Leona, and then you go back to Diamond 5 by playing Teemo over and over. Yeah. And so you're really just trolling every game you're playing Teemo. It's a complicated issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think some people will think that I've trolled in some of my games. For example, me and one of my friends, when Yuumi first came out, he would play Hecarim jungle and I'd play Yuumi support.
Yeah.
And the ADC, I'd stick with them until level 6, and once I was level 6, I'd go jump on the Hecarim, and we'd go kill the enemy jungler 10 times.
Yeah.
But my ADC would completely rage at me and be like, "You're trolling, you deserve to get banned." And it's like, okay, if you just farm, like, we're
win
gonna
this game for
yeah,
free.
we win this game because we've killed the enemy jungler 10 times, or we went and ganked mid lane, or we went and ganked top lane and killed them. We're just running around killing everyone else on the map besides their bottom lane.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird because I think a lot of AD carries specifically are used to being babysat all game. And I think it's good to babysit your AD carry all game. And so when they kind of like, we break that mold and you say, hey, just so you know, there's other ways to win the game than you getting fed and you being a superstar. Let's try a different way of winning. They throw a fit and they just act like a child the whole game. And it goes kind of back to what I was saying about Yorick. The Yorick player mentality, where you might only think, okay, I can only win this lane if I split push, and I can only split push if you guys all go bottom and I'm at top. That's the only way we win this. And that might not be the right mentality, because the other four might say, no, we win this if we group with you. We need to be with you. They have a comp that just blows us up, and you're the difference. You would win us these fights. And it's the same with the AD carries at bottom. You say, hey, all you need to do is collect XP. I know it sucks. I know it's not fun, but we'll get every single objective on the whole map and we'll win the game if you just chill. Or it's sometimes even for like 7 minutes,
Yeah.
Like we're talking 14 waves of minions you can just chill for, and they can't do it. They can't stomach not getting every single farm and fighting for their lane. And I see this with every lane. I see it with junglers, I see it with mid laners, I see it with bottom. And they'll throw the game if they're not the superstar that's winning and carrying the game. They'll say, hey, I'm coming mid, and if I don't get every single farm that's in mid, I'm gonna throw the game. And they'll even type that stuff out in chat. It's like, well, I understand that is probably the optimal way to win this game, but that's not how it works.
It's not worth throwing the game over because that victor's collecting that wave,
Yeah.
I think that brings up a whole new topic into this of playing with your team versus playing optimally.
Yeah.
Like, there are games where you could play, optimal gameplay, and everyone make sure that you could get as much farm on the ADC as possible and everything else. And then there's playing as a team, trying to do what your team does, even if it's not the most optimal play. Like, maybe Victor grabs that wave mid when the ADC could have grabbed it, but now he's able to go catch a wave bot.
Yeah.
Or it's one of those things like, okay, maybe getting Baron isn't the best play because we could have ended the game, but that's what my team's doing. And I need to go do what my team's doing because they aren't willing to end the game right now.
Yeah, I agree. I like, one of the biggest things I see is people think they're making the optimal play, but nobody's making an optimal play in silver or gold. And they're yelling and screaming at each other about, like, why would you ever do that? And it's like, dude, I'm playing at a level you don't understand right now. Like, the reason I'm not teleporting to you is because I identified that the fight was over.
Yeah.
And you just want me to try to 1v5 because you died, and you're just seeing red and you're raging. And I actually, like, I've seen this a couple times where I'm getting pinged at top lane, like, come down to this fight. I'm like, dude, I would walk down there, the fight would be over before I get there. But if I'm at top and take first blood tower, I get 1,000 gold. I get 1,000 gold. That's more than 3 of you dying. And I might even push and get the second tower for free. then it's 2,000 gold. And I've had games where I get 2,000 gold, and what we lost was like a Cloud Drake. And people are freaking out about how important dragons are. And it's like, sorry, bud, I am a full item up on my opponent.
You
And
just solo kill
and I will crush them for the rest of the game. That Cloud Drake does not matter for anyone. And I would be surprised. I think most of the players that are screaming and raging about it couldn't identify what a Cloud Drake does for them. They wouldn't say, "Oh, this is good for this matchup." They wouldn't be able to like really clearly parse what the point is. They've just seen high level gameplay where you take the dragon and that's what they see the pros do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, the pros oftentimes will give up a dragon that they don't think is important in order to do like very simple stuff like get ward and map control, maybe take some tower plates because maybe they're down an item. And they think, okay, as soon as we get our Tristana one more item, then we'll fight. And that's what they're doing. They're identifying those little breakpoints. Whereas in these low elo games, and I say low elo, like Emerald's low elo as well compared to this pro games, people are freaking out because you don't use your flash in a team fight or to steal a kill. You know, they just want you to. They want you to make a flashy play when the reality is it that important to kill their support? Probably not. So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of different things. It's a very interesting game because I believe League is always evolving and changing as time goes on.
Well, yeah, it's being developed. You know, the latest change that really struck me is there's different barons now. And the different barons have different map templates. Like the map looks different when they spawn. Top the maps changed. Bottoms the maps changed. Back when I played, one of the towers in either side lane, the top lane or the bottom lane, one of the towers was a safe lane that was easier to gank by diving, and then there was a dangerous lane where if you were pushed up, it was really easy to gank you. And that has really changed. It doesn't feel like there's an obvious safe lane anymore. Same with bottom lane. Both lanes feel pretty easy to gank. You don't have to take 5 tower shots to gank bottom and dive them and do these crazy plays. You can just walk up into lane and everybody's fighting over the entrance to river ward control. And that's something that's really changed about the game recently is ward control fights. And I think a lot of players are struggling with relearning what to do with wards.
Oh yeah, I mean that's something that I even struggle with. But one of the favorite things that has made me start buying more pink wards or red wards is one of my buddies said, you pay 75 gold for a ward, and that should prevent you dying one time. Every time you place a good red ward, that should spot an enemy jungler that would prevent a gank or allow you to start running away, and so you don't die. And so it's like, would you pay 75 gold not to die?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, it's like 75 gold not to give the enemy 300 gold plus the wave state.
Yeah, the way I try to think about it is I try to buy like 2 control wards a game, something like that. If I'm playing support, maybe I buy like 6 or something. And I don't really like set a cap. I just think minimum I'm trying to get in there and buy a control ward on backs where if I'm not going to finish a BF sword or my first item, I should buy a control ward, place it down on my way back, and the enemy might not find it for 15 minutes or the whole game. I've had wards where you put it deep in their jungle next to their red buff or something, and you see the jungler 5, 6, 7, 8 times coming through there, and they don't notice it, and then they surrender, and they go, man, that guy just knew where I was the whole time. It's yeah, I did. I warded it.
It's like every time he was going to Krugs, you knew he was there, and you knew either to back up or you knew he was walking away, and you said, okay, in like 30 seconds when he's on his bot side of his map or wherever, his blue side of his map, then I can just go fight and
Yep.
know that it's a solo fight, top versus top.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things I've started doing is I'll put down these wards, and I guess I've realized that your other lanes are just not paying attention. They
Mhm.
won't see it on the mini map. So I just go bing, 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 ping it 5 times and say, hey, the jungler's up here. You know, focus on, doing whatever you do with that knowledge, but know that he's up there. And because people will just miss it. You'll see someone like Lee Sin doing Raptors, and the enemy, your allies, will say, have you seen Lee Sin recently? And it's like, yeah, he's on the map right now.
Yeah,
Like,
he was just past this ward.
yep.
Something that I also notice is when you're pinging your allies, I don't like pinging missing in my lane. I like pinging caution in the closest lanes.
Yeah.
Because I find that if I ping missing, people don't actually look and see that missing on the map.
Yeah, they
But-
just know something's missing.
Yeah, they just maybe hear the tone or whatever,
Yeah.
and they might not take it serious. But if I ping caution, fall back in their lane,
Yep.
it appears in front of their character,
Yeah.
which means that they don't even have to look at their mini map because they're
It's just
seeing.
yeah, it's where they're CSing.
Yeah, it's where they're CSing, and that's like, oh, I'm being pinged in my lane. That's a huge difference than on the mini map.
Yeah, a good example of that is I see a lot of like people say, "Why didn't you ping missing?" And I'm like, "Well, I realized they were missing 20 seconds into the roam,
Mhm.
and I had a ward, but that they didn't walk through, so they took the long way, and they got all the way to you, and then I did ping missing, and they're upset that I didn't ping earlier." And
Yeah.
It's like, well, they blew up the wave in 2 seconds. Am I going to ping missing every single wave for the rest of the game? Or am I going to say, hey, this next wave showed up, that guy's missing?
Yeah.
And a lot of these top laners and mid laners condition their opponents by, let's say they blow up a wave really quick in, say, 10 seconds. Then they go hide. And then the next wave comes in and they stay hidden. And then they come in late into the wave and blow it up. And you think, oh, that guy has been here for 2 or 3 waves.
Mhm.
And then the next wave, he blows it up as fast as he can. And then he walks out straight towards mid.
Yeah.
And he might even have a timer on your ward. So he knows that your ward vision was just there and now it's not. It's so now he's sprinting towards your mid laner and you go, he's probably at his tower. I'm not going to ping it.
Or he's backing right now.
Yeah.
There's just so many things. If you don't have good vision, you just don't know.
Well, yeah, and I was thinking about this concept as well lately is one of the best ways to protect your mid laner is ward at top. And one of the best ways to protect top laner is to ward in mid. Because then you can catch the junglers going these odd routes and your laners going these odd routes to gank. And what I find is that a lot of players do not think of it as a 5v5 game where they're trying to protect their teammates from ganks. They think, I'm trying to protect my lane from dying.
Mm-hmm.
And so your support will just ward just far enough to protect themselves. And it won't always be good enough, because if you see somebody on that ward and you're pushed up, you might still die.
Yeah, you have to have a deeper ward the deeper you're pushing in lane.
Yeah, and oftentimes who you want to ward and do that stuff might be your jungler or mid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're already there. Walking all the way to wraiths for a support is a terrible idea.
Oh yeah.
But walking there as a mid might be 4 seconds.
Yeah.
So,
if you can keep track of the enemy jungler, the game becomes very different very quickly. Because if you could predict every single gank that's coming, you just know when to back up. You know when not to die. You should practically never die if you could keep track of the enemy jungler early game.
yeah. Yeah, and It depends on the junglers too. Like some junglers, like Shaco, if you can deny him for like 10 minutes, he's not really going to snowball very
Mm-hmm.
often. Whereas if he gets a kill at level 2, the game might just be over. Like it is
Yeah.
so bad when Shaco gets a kill level 2, then he gets a kill level 4, then he gets a kill level 5, and then he's able to invade the enemy Lee Sin or Shyvana and kill them. And then it's like, oh, dude, we cannot win this one. We can't win because that guy, I have to sit at my tower for the rest of the game.
Yeah. So, funny story about Shaco, just a quick side note, is I used to be a league coordinator at one of our local colleges, and we had a league team, and I was in charge of it. And we played against one of the best Shakos in the world. Like, he was top 300 in NA on the board, and we were playing against him. And, we formulated a plan where we just said, okay, don't chase Shaco.
Yeah.
We just said, doesn't matter if that guy lives or anything, we're just not going to chase him.
Yeah.
And we just stomped their whole team. I think they were undefeated at that point. And we just said, okay, never fighting Shaco. We are just going to dumpster the other 4 players, and we'll consider that an ace.
Yeah.
And suddenly it changed the way we played the game because we had a plan and said, this is our plan. We don't let Shaco get kills. We don't chase Shaco. We just win the game off killing the other 4 players. And we had great success with that.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, how do you win these games?
Yeah. Like a lot of people think the point of the game is just killing players. And I one of the biggest mistakes I see people do is they say, this person's 200 life, I'm 900 life, I have to kill this person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you just make them recall, that is oftentimes good enough. If they flash, that's great. But if you fight them and you kill them and then you end the fight with 200 life, you actually might be in a worse spot than you would have been if you hadn't killed them and you were at 900 HP. Pushing minions, taking plates, recalling when you have an advantage, dying for kills or taking risks even. So sometimes you take a risk where, yeah, maybe you have a 90% chance of killing this guy. If you kill them, the game state doesn't really change. But if you die, you lose the game.
Mm-hmm.
And people will take that fight, and so they say, well, 9 times out of 10, I got the kill and I did well. It's like, yeah, but you were already doing really well.
Yeah.
You were already getting him to 10% for free. But now, that one time you die, you lose that game. And they go, well, that's just one game. It's like, well, if you're doing mistakes like that across hundreds of games, that's going to affect how you win. Your ranking.
I always think about it, when you're in your correct elo, you should pretty much feed one game, get fed one game, and do okay 8 games.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, everyone's going to feed and everyone's going to get fed when they're in their proper elo. But if you feed more than you get fed, you're probably in too high of an elo, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, well, one thing I was thinking about is you might take a play style where you never feed, where you always play safe. And that might end up with you being in a lower bracket. If you never feed, you're not taking enough risks. You're not making plays that could win you a game sometimes. And I see what I see pretty often is I'll refer to them as KDA players where they're 7-0 and they're not willing to risk their shutdown gold to win the game. They want to keep their KDA high, so they'll run away. And it's like, if you kill them, we win the game here.
Yeah. Well, that 7-0 player could end up killing 4 people and then dying to the 5th, and your 4 other players kill the 5th and then
win the game.
Yeah,
but their KDA is half as good then. And so that's what they're worried about. And it's silly because you don't look like a good player when you lose a 15-0 game. That makes you
Yeah.
look like a bad player. It's like, wow, that guy never died and lost the game. There's
Yeah.
something fundamentally wrong with how he's playing.
Yeah. He obviously didn't play the way he should have.
Yeah.
If you're playing the way that you should be dying in your games. Like there should be very
If you're losing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're losing. If you're winning, maybe you don't need to die.
Yeah, but I still think you'll die in
Yeah.
most of your winning games. Like there's very few times where you're going to go unkillable demon king and get that
Yeah.
challenge.
What is that challenge? What do you have to
It's
do?
like you have to go 10-0 in the game, 10-0 or better.
Yeah.
It's like
Gotcha.
I can't remember the exact thing for it, but it's pretty much you can't die and you have to get like 10 kills.
Yeah.
And it's like that should rarely happen in your games. There's a
Yeah.
reason why it's called the unkillable demon king. Like that is a very rare title
Yeah.
to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's fine too for players to kind of set those goals where they say, I want to get this goal of getting this title, but yeah, it's gonna lower your rank if you're never taking risks. It's gonna be worse overall, and it also depends a little bit on the champions you're playing, because some champions just, yeah, if you went 15-0 on Teemo, that's not as good as 15-0 on Jax, right? Like that's
Yeah.
two very different things. And yeah, you can win lane hard as Renekton. I win lane super hard on Renekton, and you need to start doing things like tower dives and intense pressure if you want to win the game with your team. Because if you're not making an impact with your kills, then their AD carry is going to get fed and then just mow you over in the late game.
I agree with that. So, as we're beginning to wrap up here, what are some of your goals for the next week?
So my goals for the next week, I mean, yeah, it's silly. So with my YouTube channel, I've just been experimenting with different types of videos. So I have some tips and tricks videos coming out. Last week I did some like gameplay of action and different champions that I'm learning. I did Lux and I did Lulu and just talked about learning these, high S tier champions that I'm gonna see in a lot of games. One, like, I've been experimenting with YouTube, and in my actual games, I'm trying to learn the top 10 champions in every role. So you might have like Tryndamere, Jax, Renekton, Garen, Darius, Aatrox. I'm trying to learn those top 10 champions that you see all the time. And mid, it's very similar. I want to play and see how it feels to play Katarina and I don't know, Malzahar and Lux and Galio, these champions that I'm seeing a lot. I see them very, very regularly, and same with bottom. I think there's probably only like 6 AD carries that are commonly played. It's Ezreal, Jinx, Kai'Sa, Caitlyn, Misfortune, and you see them in almost every game. And so it seems silly for me to worry about learning 100 different champions or 180 champions, because it used to be I knew every champion. I knew what every ability did. I knew the kind of mana cost every ability was or close. And there's so many champions and so much to learn that I'm trying to just cut it down to 10 champions per lane. If I knew what 10 champions per lane were doing, that's more than half my games are just those champions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've been working on learning. That's what I'm going to work on in the future. And I think I want to get Diamond this season. And I really feel like if I sat down and played 40, 50, 60 games, I'd probably be Diamond. But I'm just struggling to even get 60 games under my belt. Right now, I think I have probably 50 or 60 this season. I should be able to get, a couple hundred in a season, but I'm just not playing them.
Yeah.
I'm playing 30 or 40 a season, and then I end up being emerald or platinum, and I'm just not playing. So what about you?
I think right now I want to work on uploading a video to my YouTube every day.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's a game where I'm winning or losing. I want to upload a video a day, and I also want to play roughly at least a game a day.
Yeah.
I work 40 hours. I work 4 10s. So Monday through Thursday, that's a really hard goal. But Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I have plenty of time to play more games. So I should be able to play games where I can work on improving and being a team player. And I think I will go up in ELO if I play with my team in every game.
Yeah.
I think that my basic fundamentals are good enough where I will climb, and I have a positive win rate this season, which makes me conclude that I should be going up in rank
until that win rate goes back to the 50%.
Yeah. And so right now, it's hard to say, do I need to improve on this, or this, if I'm not at my peak ELO at the moment. So I think just playing games and maybe focusing on one thing here or there in those games and will help me improve and get to that peak ELO when I can really focus on something that will help me continue to climb.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I think I almost feel like I just need to play one champion and grind out games, and I'll get to that point you're describing where now I'm learning. I'm not quite there yet because there's just so many different factors going on. And once I get to say Emerald 2, let's say I mellow out there and that's where I'm stuck. Maybe every day I try to learn a new tool that will help me go up. And I can see sometimes that might be switching a champion, and you might actually go down for 20 or 30 games, and then you bring it back up, and then you start winning again. And so, yeah, I'm looking for long-term gains over the course of a year. And so that's how I'm taking it. So.
Yeah. I would really love to hit Diamond this season, but I'm with you. I think long-term gains are way more important, and I'd feel way more accomplished if I hit Master or Grandmaster in 2 years than if I hit Diamond next week.
Yeah, and then get stuck there forever.
Yes.
Because I think both of us could probably learn a strong cheese, like say Tryndamere split push cheese, and just learn the basics of it, and then go and grind and get quite a bit of ELO in a very short amount of time, and not really know how to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's worth putting time into, and it might make us worse players in the long term. To understand it is one thing, but to go grind 50 or 100 games is completely different.
Yeah. I agree. Well, thank you everyone for watching our Red Side Blue Side podcast. And I think that wraps it up for today, unless you have anything else you want to say.
No, I think I've said it all. Goodbye, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.